All right, so I think there was a little problem that I needed to refresh my R, and that is why I was running. So I had run some part of R, and then because of that, those variables had already been imprinted. So as I was trying to run, R was only seeing the old one, and so I had to refresh it. Okay, so I'm just going to show us how to be able to visualize what a word cloud, and then how to be able to interpret it. All right, so I was just saying that word cloud is actually a very handy tool to be able to detect or to check how something is doing. For you know that recently, if you are talking, if when you are doing a live coverage on Facebook, you see that you can see there is an inscription that is following alongside. We can actually get those inscriptions out and then isolate some words from there or extract some words from there and then check to see how many times those words have been mentioned. It's part of sentiment analysis that people do. I can actually go on Twitter to actually, apply for API, and then I'll be able to sample or to pull up the data on a particular view or a particular personnel or a product. And I want to check, I want to know how people are accepting the product or not. And so after I have done that, I can actually use word cloud to visualize it. So I'm just saying that in Ghana at the moment, we can see there is so much talk about political parties and that of Parliament of Ghana because of one or two things. So we decided to just pick up some sentiment from a particular radio station in Ghana here, and then we want to see how a parliament together with the CSOs and then the political parties, how many times are people talking about them? So if we want to know that when people are talking about something, they keep mentioning the thing's name. So we have to check the number of times it has been mentioned. So I'm just creating some variables here. So this parliament, and I'm saying that we checked and we noticed that parliament has been created 200 times, MPP created this number of times and in that order. So I'm just going to run this. So when I do that, so those variables have been created. I could run this again. That's for CSOs. It has also been created. So what I need to do first of all is to create a data set. Then I could just, I just call it, I just give it a particular name, but I think let me give it a popular, number of times mentioned. Number of times mentioned. So that should be the proper name. So when I come here, if you noticed, we have to also create a frequency that will tally with the number of times it has been mentioned. For instance, if I say Parliament has been mentioned, let's say 200 times, where it's possible that it has been mentioned 200 times or the radio station, but at different times or different programs running. So we need to be able to break down to see. It's possible in one of the programs it was much more mentioned than the other program. So that's what we can actually do. So when we have finished, that's where we need to create the frequencies. And the frequencies, you create it based on these numbers I have here, 200 plus 80 plus 50 plus 35, that would be 365. So I just create a dummy frequency between 3 and then 7. I could actually make it 3 and then 17. Right? So that will not change anything. And so I need to create a data frame of these variables, and then the number of times each of them have been mentioned at different places. So I just run that, and the data frame is created. For instance, if you check the dimension, we have a data frame of 2 rows and 2 columns and then 365 rows. All right, so let's check and see. Now that we are ready, we can actually, now create our word cloud, and then we try to see whether we can interpret what that means. So, but to do that, I need to be able to make sure that my word cloud is actually loaded. So you go to your package and then just click on word cloud. So it is loaded now. So I can just I can go back to my plot, and then I try to generate my word cloud. So in word cloud, to generate a word cloud, you simply need the function word cloud followed by the data frame that you created, and then you just tell the sizes of the words that, or the text or whatsoever that you want it to appear. So when you do that, and before you run that, wet cloud actually comes is one of the bulky images that comes. So you have to make sure you create a space for the plot size, so that if not, when you run sometime, R will say that the margins are too, or the image is too large for the margins. So you see it's not an error, you just need to stretch this over. So I'm going to run my wet cloud, and then you will see how. So you see that the wet cloud is being generated at the moment. All right, so you notice that wet cloud has been generated, and then if you look at the wet cloud at a glance, one of the interpretation you use in wet cloud is that when you look at it at a glance, the much frequent word or the name that has been mentioned in this context is Parliament. You can see Parliament everywhere. You might think that the others don't exist. Parliament exists. So you see that yes, you might think that others don't exist, but they do exist. But because Parliament has been mentioned way more times than what the rest, then you notice that Parliament is much more mentioned. Or is much more eligible than the others. So, but if you look at the way Parliament is now, if I bring my cursor to this, the bigger one, then you see that Parliament was mentioned how many times? 16 times. It was mentioned 16 times. So let's assume that when we're given the frequency, we give the frequencies based on the number of times or the number of programs in the radio stations. So let's say the radio station has about 17. They have about 17 different programs, or what they have about 10 different programs, and then we try to check to see in one of the programs, in each of the programs, how many times was Parliament mentioned. So if I bring my cursor here, you can see it means that this was the highest mentioned, 16. It was mentioned 16 times during this particular program. So if you go and check another one like here, you notice that one was mentioned only 9 times. If you check the immediate one here, it was mentioned 13 times. If you check this, it was mentioned 15 times. Now that's for Parliament. So we can do inter-comparison and intra-comparison with this one. So we can actually see Parliament alone, and then we check the number of times Parliament was mentioned across all the programs on the on the radio station. After that, we can compare Parliament mentioned to the other variable that we are also measuring. There were also other political parties that we mentioned. If you check, NPP is here, and then how many times was it mentioned? I think it should be there, but where I'm unable to see it because of the view. So if I bring my cursor, let's say to this, so we see that NPP was mentioned 7 times in this particular program. So in this kind of data analysis, it's always easy. For instance, it gives you an instant glance of how something is doing. For instance, you have just launched a new product and it is in town. People are buying. So you want to find out we want to find out the awareness of this particular product that you have launched. Then you can actually go to different locations in town, sample them up. Maybe if you can sample at a time, you can sample at different times, but you have the frequencies. When you come, you have your frequencies, you have the number of times that you have sampled all of them. Then you can use wet cloud too to be able to find out. I could actually have plotted, if it were locations, we could have actually allowed the locations to be part of it, and then we see how it is. But in this case, we can see that Parliament is much more mentioned at the radio station than any other CSO or political party. And that's how we are able to visualize wet cloud, and that's how we are able to interpret it. It's much more about just checking the number of times something has happened as compared. You can do that across. You can use the same scenario to be able to interpret or do whatever the interpretation that you need to give to your data set. That's the video of today. The previous video I was trying to do was having a challenge because I had not closed my RSS yesterday, so I needed to refresh it, and that's where it was having those challenges. Thank you. That's your video for today. I'll see you.